Massey's going to talk? All right. Don't pay attention.
Yeah. Slides will show up in a minute. My name is Massey Burke. I'm the director of the California Straw Building Association, and we're doing the second half of building decarbonization, focusing on materials, and very specifically plant-based materials. And this is essentially a primer to let you know that that world is growing and is evolving, hopefully rapidly enough to meet and really play a big role in building decarbonization. And so we're just going to talk. Anthony and I collaborate in a whole bunch of different ways. We actually are in the East Bay, so we came up to say hi. And just know that there's a bunch of us immediately south of you that work on this stuff and think about this stuff, and also here as well. I have several community members in the room. The California Straw Building Association is a nonprofit that's been around for 30 years. If you know about straw building or natural building, you probably know of its grassroots iteration, which is alive and well. And this is by which I mean, and this is how I was originally taught. I was taught hands-on building 20 years ago, between then and now, got really interested in how do you take this stuff that was wonderful and happening at the ends of dirt roads and had no code and nothing else, and grow it into everybody else's lives in other contexts. And great strides have been made in that regard in our community, and there's a lot more to do. It's really just at the beginning. Good.
It'll kick in. It should kick in. Nothing changed. At least we can see the slides.
You can see the slides. You just hold the computer up.
They look great.
Turn the laptop around.
Keep talking.
Okay, I have to remember what I was going to say.
There we go. Is that
There we go.
no?
It still says that no solar sound, so it's like as if the plug isn't coming through.
I'm sorry?
The HDMI cable, is
Oh,
that?
this one?
All right. Well, I'll keep talking and then figure out where I am in my slides. So California Straw Building Association we're straw focused, but everybody in our community is interested in various types of bio-based materials, other types of natural materials. This includes hemp and types of earthen building, bamboo construction, use of alternative wood, all sorts of other just interesting components. And we increasingly overlap with climate action and building decarbonization orgs that aren't specific to natural building. And so there's a lot of network densification happening around all of this.
There.
There we go. Okay.
Keep talking.
Keep talking, okay. And so what we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about CASBA a little bit because we're an umbrella, and then Anthony is going to talk about two other manifestations of what's happening with natural building, straw-based building. So I like to call, CASBA has been around for 30 years, was instrumental in writing the code that we have for straw construction, which is mostly residential, and has helped with other types of, supporting other types of earthen building, writing code for cob construction, other things like that. But I would say we are headed toward CASBA 2.0, which has been my endeavor as a director. I co-directed with the previous director for a few years, and then I've been directing for the last few years, mostly over the pandemic. And my goal has been to help the generational shift, from the founding generation to the up-and-coming generation, and then to really look at what expanding our impact looks like. And so I like to call us the West Coast premier straw construction think tank. Just kind of a joke because I don't think we have any other straw construction think tanks on the West Coast. That's mostly not to offend our colleagues in Colorado. So we are a growing group of people that all relate to using straw and other natural materials in building. And so it's architects and builders, of course, but increasingly farmers and climate action, policy people, people doing fire rebuild work specifically, like insurance people, everything you can imagine. And so it's a big network of just people who care about this stuff and are helping to scale it. Why straw? If you are here, I imagine I don't need to tell you why, but one thing that I have loved, this Venn diagram, it's kind of oddly, came out of a conversation that I had recently with one of my favorite local policy people. And the thing that's driven me nuts forever about trying to communicate the value of natural building is that in sort of a conventional conversation or a conventionally framed conversation, straw building is maybe slower or softer, or like if you're trying to compare it one-on-one to any particular aspect of a conventional building product, it can be hard to communicate the value, although that's actually changing. But this friend of mine that I was talking to was like, thing about straw and bio-based materials is that, you know, from all of the policy buckets that she tends to run into for buildings, you know, so, you know, carbon, circularity, you know, the categories that you see here, healthy buildings, bioregional resilience, and social equity. Many different materials will fit one of those categories, but bio-based materials are the only one that hits all of them. And so it's a holistic solution in the built environment. Straw and carbon, you probably know this. We say the built environment generates 40% of annual emissions. I believe previous speaker said 30, there's debate, depends on how you count. Building materials are 13% of that, and so it's a very high leverage place to focus decarbonization energy. And the other thing about embodied carbon, so the carbon that goes along with building materials, is that all of the emissions associated with that are upstream. So they happen before you even start operating the building. And so that's all happening now, and it takes about 15 years for a normal building operational emissions, so the emissions associated with heating and cooling, to catch up with that initial impact of the materials choices. And so materials are a very important place to focus, and you basically can't make a zero carbon building without using some form of plant-based building materials, because, and just a note about, we do have a lot of straw to build with, so it's, you know, it's a scalable solution to focus on growing straw construction. But the main reason is that the job of straw is the stalk that comes off of a grain plant, and its job is to take atmospheric carbon and turn it into solid material. And so if that straw is left out in the field to decompose after you harvest the grain, that goes right back into the atmosphere. But if you take that straw and put it in a building, it stores carbon. It's one of the easiest carbon storage mechanisms we have. And yeah, a house built with straw typically stores around 10 tons, so it's a good amount. Again, a little bit more about embodied carbon versus operational carbon. You can just see, you know, straw is typically, can be a structural material, but is more typically insulation, and just compared to other insulative materials. I find this really interesting. You might not know, but a lot of the rigid foams have incredibly high embodied carbon impacts from their manufacturer. And so you can see these are like XPS in particular, and it's a huge amount of carbon just by making it, even though it contributes to building performance, and hemp and straw are the best all the way to the other end of the spectrum. Current state of straw building in the United States is primarily residential. Typically two styles of straw construction, straw bale and light straw clay, just two different forms of infill in a frame typically. But as Anthony's going to talk about, there is a growth of companies creating products and also prefabricated straw wall systems. And that's begun to grow rather rapidly to help straw integrate more easily with different building systems. What to say about that? Yeah, just fun stuff around like what straw buildings can look like, and natural buildings can look like. They don't have to look like Adobe, but they can. And this is a personal excitement of mine. The hidden superpower of straw is that it has very short, very transparent supply chains. And just a note that I've, you know, transitioned from talking about natural materials to mostly straw, because straw is kind of my focus now, but this applies to hemp, bamboo, other plant-based materials. It's very easy to conceive of a building economy that is produced almost entirely within California, using straw, other plant residues. Like, that's not much of a stretch. And you also have the ability to make choices around land management that produces those materials. And so you have all of these ways in to really, you know, enact transformational change, and all of the material is pretty much there. And so it's really just putting the pieces together. And so CASBA is starting to work on actually researching what it looks like to create these bioregional economies based on straw and other natural materials with other academic groups that do bioregional study of various types. So that's CASBA. And now I'm going to turn it over. Oh wait, current endeavors. Yeah, other stuff we do. Most of what we do is about removing barriers to straw construction. So a lot of research. We have our annual conference, which I'd be plugging because it's next week, except we already closed registration. So come next year if you can. We hop it around California. It's a lot of fun. We do code development. We are increasingly working on what I'm calling the fire rebuild toolkit, and so we have a whole lot of case studies from the fires up here that we're assembling into a much more coherent package just to help, obviously, the LA rebuild, but future fires, and that's something we hope to add to over time. And so I'd love to be better connected, with some of the communities up here in creating that tool. And then, yeah, supporting straw-based building product development. All right, Anthony Dente, who is one of my favorite people.
Thanks, Massey.
With the mic?
Out the mic?
Yeah, with the mic.
All right.
They're recording.
Well,
Oh, sorry, I totally
Yeah, thanks for-
Mike.
You had a rough start. We got you on track. Thanks, Massey. And Ted and Diane, that was excellent. I'm looking forward to talking more about that later. Just this slide represents that 11% or 13, as Massey described, or whatever number around there, that embodied carbon, mostly unaddressed until very recently when we've had data to quantify it more. Embodied carbon is an upfront cost in buildings. It all happens before day one of occupancy versus the other 28% or whatever, close to that is operational. And most of you in this room know this, but it's like, that's why we're caring right now. And I'm going to talk about, I'm going to move quickly through slides just to give you a breadth of the things that Massey and I both have our hands in that might affect your work in the building space. And I'm going to be here all day so we can talk more about it, and I'd love to do that. But I'm going to talk about what our companies do, and our companies do this because we care about these things. And it's a bold statement to say, but anything that's at least adjacent or to structure or is structural, that's relevant to deep green or low carbon or natural building systems, we're probably on the cutting edge of it as it relates to residential and smaller mid-rise commercial construction. But I'm the CEO of Verdant Structural Engineers and Verdant Building Products. And anything I say that I did today, I mean we did. I love my team down in Berkeley, West Berkeley. There's Massey. If you don't know what she looks like. We work on a wide range of projects from small commercial to mid-range, mixed-use, mid-rise commercial, and we found ourselves specializing in these alternative building materials. And today we're talking about straw and hemp, and I'll also talk about the clay systems, Adobe, rammed earth, CEB, compressed earth block, earth bag, the other systems. But we engage with tenant improvements and commercial work too. As I'm curious to understand about those hoods, they're always a real pain to deal with, and I think we could move the industry if they didn't have to deal with that. But there's a lot of confusion sometimes about natural building systems when we say, what are they really? And I lump them into three categories: things that are like wood, which is mostly the straws and the hemps. It's like wood construction, like normal wood construction, where these are insulations that are going around a gravity system resisted by wood and mostly a lateral system resisted by wood, earthquake and wind system resisted by wood. And I can talk about the different forms of that we use. And some of them have evolved over time as we get more building science data on moisture exchange and thermal performance. And then there's the things that are like concrete or CMU, which are your Adobes, your cob, monolithic Adobe, compressed earth blocks, rammed earth. And then there's this one unique case, which is for straw construction, we use reinforced plaster skins as a structural element. So it's a structural sandwich package. So that one's in the mix there too. But there's, now's like a time I'll say I'm also the vice president of the Cobb Research Institute, which originally got me into a lot of code development with this work. Cobb being, again, monolithic Adobe. It's a term that comes from England where they would build this. But there's, and just kind of diving into the earthen suite for a moment, these very non-combustible materials, but it's just a matter of, is it a block? Is it placed? Is it rammed? And each of these get a different name and kind of have a different building community even. But it's only those subtle things I just mentioned that differentiate these. So don't get confused if someone's saying rammed earth and you're like, I thought it was Adobe, but what's the difference? And a rammed earth Adobe block is actually a compressed earth block. And all of these materials we're talking about today are incredibly fire-safe materials. I've been a part of a couple ASTM E119 fire hour rating tests. The far end is cob or monolithic Adobe, and this one is recently done hempcrete test that Amerisham's company out of Pennsylvania, working nationally, that I know Aaron works a lot with, just did this with one of their grants from the Army, actually, as far as I'm aware of.
A grant from the Army.
Yes, we can talk about that later. But like this test, for example, 2,000 degrees for 2 hours on one side of the wall. Now these are slightly thicker walls, or 12-inch walls, but on the other side of the wall, for that 2 hours, they changed less than 5 degrees, which was less than the floor slab of the factory that day. I was there for that test in Bryan, Texas. I mean, we make ovens out of some of these materials, and we have the same kind of documentation for straw wall systems. They're different. It is a combustible material, but it's still a very safe system. Some of the earthen systems, it's good to remember, they do stabilize with cement and lime. There is a lime matrix in hemp as well, and keeping in mind that those materials do have a carbon consequence to them, and just being honest about it and quantifying it right, and working with it to always get better and use the right sources. Massey and I just recently wrote a book that is a wild step forward in building science knowledge on earthen-based construction. It's specifically titled Cob, but any of the earthen suite would apply to this. I have a couple copies here. It's $50 out there, which is a big price. I think it's why people don't read anymore. But but I recommend it, even if you're working with any of these alternative materials. It would be applicable to what you're doing, and it's very geared towards you getting permits. And speaking of permits, we have our hands, we're just trying to help people get permits for these materials, and so we started collaborating with universities. We found ourselves with, to assist our analysis and whatnot, we found ourselves with a lot of testing, and that's how we got into code development. Now, I have the pleasure of going to these wildly exciting International Code Council committee meetings every 3 years. But here is the circle that the building code would like you to think encompasses all the problems in the world, and here is not all the problems, but definitely more of the problems. And there's a number of people really working to expand that bubble of what the building code does address. And the mission statement of the International Code Council, there's a change to that on the proposal for the 2027. The hearings are coming up next week, but Martin Hammer and David Eisenberg, who I work a lot with, were behind that in trying to make this move happen. But like I said, it's just a wildly exciting environment, and if you want to take part in it, talk to me. And, there's a role for everyone. But when I first started my career in this space, nearly zero of these natural building deep low carbon codes existed. Now I have some international codes up here. Some of them have existed. There's nuance to all of these, and not all of them are specifically adopted in your region either. But I was the lead engineer for the monolithic Adobe code, the Hempcrete code. Our office has taken a big role in the straw code development. And even if it's not code in your region, don't underestimate the power of the alternative materials section 10411 in the International Building Code or California Building Code. My office has never been unsuccessful with an alternative submittal when we had a committed client that was open to compromise. And so even if that code's not code in your region, it's your first reference document when submitting under this platform code. And if you are using the code, one of these codes, any code really, remember that the commentary exists, because code language has to come in minimum standards and can't make recommendations on best practices, but the commentary can. And the ICC really has a lot of trust, especially my older colleagues that I've come up in this world with, but they let us write the commentary, like Comp Law State, I don't even know if they read it. Now, practicalities, how does scaling low carbon as we see the future of this and really what's happening right now and what's coming, I want to share that with you because I think there's ways to use these materials in your practices that have advanced in like the past 3 years, but definitely 5 years and 100% 10 years that you might not be aware of. We like to talk about the market drivers. Obviously, the Inflation Reduction Act is not as big of a mover as we thought it might be. But I am feeling a cultural backlash from that, and I feel like when these things happen at a higher level, people take agency like, oh, I'm going to have to fix this on my own. So don't underestimate that. But lots of policies, building code mandates. California's leading the way on the embodied carbon building code requirements, and we're expecting that to follow suit, that we're going to need to document embodied carbon in materials. Because if you think about embodied carbon, when you go far enough back the chain, PG&E cares about embodied carbon, but no, they should care about operational carbon. No, it's the same energy. The factories are paying PG&E too. And so if we have Title 24 regulating our operational carbon, now that we have the documentation to talk about embodied carbon, there's no reason we're not going to have the Title 24 version for embodied carbon down the pike, and unless the world burns down, because I'll talk about the kind of in our trajectory. At one point, we teamed up with StopWaste.org and Arup and CASBA and Argentild Architecture, and we did this pilot project. What would it be like? It was a concept building. What would it be like to design a mid-rise infill building with carbon storing in mind on all aspects? And so this is available at the Carbon Leadership East Bay website. But it was one step in our trajectory to developing what is our second company, the Verdant Building Products, and the Verdant Panel. And we're trying to create the next generation of scalable low carbon materials. And so we took the essence of straw bale, the main essence of straw bale, and we're packaging it in a form factor that is scalable and cost effective and performance effective as conventional materials. There's Massey and our other co-founder, but it's a prefabricated wall panel that uses assembly line processes to bring costs down, and it's straw insulated, so it's a carbon storing. But our core innovation is and very much thanks to Massey, is that we've optimized straw as an insulator, thinking about it as an engineerable material and not tied to the full bale form that it's traditionally been tied to. And this is how we've enhanced the straw performance beyond what straw has been possible of doing before, and we're on track to be equivalent to fiberglass and rock wool at near an R of 4. And that allows the walls to have equivalent thicknesses, and therefore your contractors don't look at you cross-eyed when you tell them you have a 2-foot thick straw wall to save the environment. And these materials aren't more expensive, and now that we can build them in similar performance ways, we just need help getting to scale. The EPA gave us some of this assistance with $500,000 to develop this in a Small Business Innovation Research Grant. And that facilitated us getting into our phase 1 deployment of this panelized product, which is a structural and insulated panel that can be made in any shape or form, and we can talk about the subtleties of that. But we're in phase 1 deployment. If you'd like to put it in one of your projects, I'm happy to share all the details about what that means. This is our early adopter program. We're making them in the East Bay. And as discussed, our connection of tying our farming communities to our building communities, shortening the supply chain, like no one's going to argue that that isn't a good thing, especially with as hard as they're getting hit right now from the federal government. We're cost competitive out the gate. Our phase 1 is around $30 to $40 a square foot, and which is comparable to high-end prefab, but our models are showing that if we get the support we need to get to full deployment at scale, we will be cost effective with these other materials. And it's outrageous that it's cheaper and easier to build your buildings with things we dig from so deep in the ground of fossil fuel made than it is to get safe and effective materials from your farmers. And it's just because those have been subsidized for so many years, and it's so hard for a company like this to get up to scale. So we need your help and the community's help. We're even doing a funding raise on the company too. If you know people that are involved with that kind of thing, I'm happy to talk about it offline too. There are other panelized straw systems out there that are great. They're wider, but EcoCocoon and New Frameworks, these are close colleagues of ours. I engineer their systems all the time. We did an EcoCocoon house down in Palo Alto. And so be aware of those. There are a lot of hemp products now that are out in the market. I mentioned Amerishon. They're doing a great thing with a blown system. And there are a number of prefab panel companies that are trying to get started, as well as block companies. Some of them trying to be structural, but a lot of them insulation. And it's this hempcrete typically is a fiber material binded in a lime matrix, just like cob is a straw and light straw clay is a straw material binded in a clay matrix. And so and most hemp products are agricultural byproducts and not source grown as well. It's the herd of the plant that most hemp manufacturers, clothing, paper, whatnot, don't use. I always love to talk about the potentials for low carbon foundation systems. I was the lead proponent of the expansion of rubble trench and crushed stone use in the International Residential Code to minimize the concrete needed at the base of your building, and doing the rest of that with just crushed stone, which we use as a road base and a compression-based base all the time. It's a no-brainer solution. But low carbon concrete solutions, I was part of the Marin County Low Carbon Concrete Code, first of its kind on that front. And pin piers and geo-pier solutions like rammed earth aggregate pier solutions that can save you in some cases from drilling massively huge concrete piers. Bamboo is a system we work with more internationally when that comes up, but also started in this area, Bamcor, a wonderful company making a prefabricated panel system. Both Bamcor and EcoCocoon are shipping materials from international places, but they're documenting that the barge shipping like carbon per crate is so low, and those numbers are kind of fascinating. It's hard to really like totally wrap your mind around them, but the numbers seem very real. And so that's, I recommend supporting. We help engineer their buildings all the time too. There are folks exploring 3D printing earthen systems. I'm working with a number of companies on this front, and I think this will be part of the future, but it's difficult. Terran Robotics is one I've been working with for a very long time out of Indiana. Happy to share more about that front. They're all doing it different ways, extruding, blowing, using cranes. They were trying to do drones, but they dropped that idea about a year ago.
Good pun.
Yeah, turns out it was complicated. Who knew? And there are rammed earth products out there. Rammed Earth Works, a California-based company for a long time. The late David Easton started, and a lot of their systems still have a decent amount of cement stabilization in them and are higher carbon. But if you're looking for that rammed earth look, they have like the thinner wall panel veneer you can use without doing the full thick overly stabilized rammed earth walls. So, but we help them engineer that product and their systems on a regular basis too. And then there's the mycelium structural folks. Occam Works being one of them is another startup company and that I've been on and off consulting with for a number of years too. Believe it or not, this is also difficult to do, and that's in development. And you know, might be decades down the road before they really get that into buildings. But just kind of, this is my last slide of like what's coming down the pipe that I see people really putting very real time in personally. And there's a lot of other awesome things going on that I don't have my hands in, but this is things that I can talk very directly and specifically about if anybody's interested in it. So thanks for listening, everybody.
So, how do we get our hands on the prefab straw system? What would be the steps to be able to get those into one of our buildings?
You have to be really nice to me first because I'm the one doing all the infill matrix. Actually, you'd be better answer for that because I don't know what size beta you're looking for.
We're open to anything that makes sense. We're in phase 1 deployment, so we can be flexible. But the smaller scale structures, the like medium residential and below, are the most desirable. But if you have someone that's like building a bigger structure, or even commercial building, we are talking to UC in Southern California about a demonstration project they have that's bigger because, you know, they're the UC system, and we did some of our initial testing with UC Berkeley at their field station too. So, but write me and let me know you think you have a client that this is a fit for, and I'd be happy to walk you down what we're good at, what we're not good at, and make sure it's a good fit for your client. And then, you know, there's the RR value isn't at 4 yet, and we're citing 3 right now, and this is one caveat of the phase 1. And so if that's going to work for you, there's different ways around that. I'd get into technicalities, but yeah, the first step is to call me.
Take the first step.
And just to add that a little bit, I don't do any of the business stuff for the panel. I've been in the deep wormhole of matrix development, so if anybody has questions about that, that's what I can answer.
First I want to say that was amazing. There was just so much deep, rich information, and I'm really impressed by all the stuff that you do. One of the things I was noticing missing, because it's a personal sort of interest of mine, in Sonoma County, in our wildlands, we are choked with small brush and trees. We're trying to clear that out to reduce wildfire risk and improve ecosystems. We have all this small woody biomass that needs to be used and needs to find commercialization. Any thoughts on sort of what that looks like, developing that, who's doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I can speak to that a bit, and then you can too. So that to me is part of the bioregional economic development, and we're less specialists in what to do with wood fibers than straw fiber, meaning straw and hemp, because they're a little bit dissimilar, like processing. But there have been a lot of preliminary efforts to assess volume and what kind of products you can make and all that kind of thing. And you're probably aware of the emergent wood fiber fiberboard and that kind of
A little
category
bit. I'm fairly
market.
new in the field as well.
Yeah, so it's very emergent. We've been waiting for our first domestic wood fiber board to come on the market for like a gazillion years, and it is, I believe, finally available now. It's Gutex. Yeah, they're East Coast. It's a Maine, actually pretty interesting company. They took over an old traditional forestry or wood products center in Maine and revived it as a wood fiber board manufacturing center, and so, but it's just taken them, because it's difficult to scale these companies. But that kind of product, or figuring out how to use chipped wood in other types of composites, I mean, I think there's a huge amount of potential there, and I think what's tricky is using diverse feedstocks. And so how do you, that's one of the challenges of using like, there's a whole lot of orchard waste, because orchards are removed. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but we did actually do an overview report on just how much wood comes out of orchard removal, in the Central Valley, and it's a huge amount. And so there's quite a lot of feedstock, and it's more just how do you use it. The nice thing about straw is you don't have to do very much to it, and so this is actually getting into my straw matrix wormhole. Like, for baled straw, you bale it in the field and you put it in the building, like that's it, and for a couple of the other methods you might mix it with clay or whatever, so it's crazy, it's kind of pre-refined in a way, and what we're doing is kind of complex in the sense of just being very fussy in its kind of microstructure to get the R value that we need, but it still doesn't have very much stuff in it, and so the tricky thing I think with wood waste is that you need to be able to have it be pretty simple or have a way to process a lot of it at once, anyway, so that's